Is everybody here, Tammy, and are we quorate?
We are quorate, Chair. All the members of the committee are here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Standards Committee on the 13th of July 2022. If you didn't know already, I'm Cliff Jones. I'm the chair of the Standards Committee. Can I please remind you all to switch off your phones or put them onto silent for the duration of the meeting? And in addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated, namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either by raising your electronic hand via Teams or your actual hand? If you are with us here in the, I don't need to do this because we're not in the council chamber, and following on from the conversation that's just ended, I will assume that you all have read the paperwork before us for today's meeting prior to the meeting. Okay, good. And before we do move on, because we're quite a few new faces, I'm going to informally suggest that we make a very brief introduction of ourselves to the rest of the committee. I'll start with myself. My name is Cliff Jones. My background is in the coal mining industry. I started work in the industry when I was 15 and ended up being the general manager of two very large and prestigious mines in South Wales. And since then, I've done other things. I've been a magistrate, a member of Standards Committee, sat on the council of the university in Swansea, being the deputy chairman of an NHS trust, and lately I have been a member of, or a lay member of, the All Wales Medicine Strategy Group. So the background is in industry and in the sort of broader society that we live in. So anyway, that's Cliff Jones. Perhaps I can move on and do it in ladies first. Perhaps Louise, you could tell us about yourself. You're on mute, Louise.
Right. Morning, everybody. Sorry about that. Yes, Louise Fleet, been a member of Standards Committee, I think, for perhaps 4 years now. Time goes by so quickly. But my background is that, well, I've worked for several organisations in Swansea, including Swansea City Council, where I was head of member support and scrutiny. So got lots of experience with working with members and again, with a lot of the work of the Standards Committee, because it was my role to ensure that members were adhering to the Code of Conduct. So, but I've also been a magistrate for nearly 30 years. I'm a trustee of Neath, Talbot, CVS and Thrive Women's Aid, plus a number of other charities. My last job was with the Wales Audit Office, and I was an inspector with the Audit Office, inspecting local government. So again, experience from all over Wales as to how different councils operate as well. And I'm currently Lord Lieutenant of West Glamorgan. I'm not here in that capacity, but that's something else that I'm doing as well. That's me.
Thank you, Louise. And perhaps Town Councillor Caroline Edwards.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt there. We don't have Councillor Edwards with us at the moment. I am working in the background to try and get her in, but I am failing at the moment, Chair. So
in the meantime, while you are busy at it, Tammy, perhaps Councillor Sarah Thomas at the
Hiya.
Hiya.
So I've got a background in technology, but most recently I've been heavily involved with some local charities, which are Canolfan Māori and Adult Learning Wales. I'm the chair of a community council, Sgwanca Gerwyn Community Council, and I've recently become a county councillor and joined yourselves, and I am the chair of the Labour group within the county council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Carpenter. You're on mute, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay. Yeah, Wayne Carpenter representing Neath East, new councillor like Sarah, and my background is varied. 21 years working as an officer in education for West Glamorgan County Council, and then a church minister for 30 years. So now retired 3 years ago as a church minister. So bit of a varied background, really, and I'm enjoying getting my feet under the table, as it were, with the council now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, Tom Ward.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Tom Ward. I was a police officer with South Wales Police for 31 years, retired in 2017, and I'm now employed as civilian staff with South Wales Police. Came on the Standards Committee around about the same time as Louise in 2018. And that's me.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Now, Tommy, what have I missed out?
Sorry, Chair, it takes me a while to get the microphone back on. You haven't missed anybody. Councillor Carolyn Edwards will be our town and community councillor from this afternoon when she's appointed at full council. She was going to attend this morning as an observer to the meeting, but we are not encore it due to her not being here. I'm still trying to get her into the meeting because I know she was interested in observing. We've also got Neath Talbot councillor Andy Lodwig joining us as an observer also. He will be a substitute for the Neath Talbot councillors when elected in council this afternoon, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Anyway, we've got an idea of who each of us is now. So I'm going to formally start the meeting, and I've formally started the meeting and done the introductions, and move on to business now, and move to agenda item 2, and that's declarations of interest. So are there any interest to declare? And if yes, Tammy will then forward an electronic version of the declaration of interest form for you to complete and email back to her. Are you able to confirm, Tammy, if there are any declarations of interest or otherwise?
Yes, certainly, Chair. I see 2 hands raised, Councillor Sarah Thomas and Louise Fleet.
Okay. Right. Are they going to affect the rest of the meeting?
If it's all right with you, Chair, if we could ask the councillor and the co-opted member to declare their interests, please.
Okay. Any particular order, Louise, would you like to start?
Okay. I just thought I'd mention it. I'm not sure if it is a declaration of interest, but we have an item which is agenda item 9 regarding Councillor Sonia Reynolds and Sarah. Just thought I would mention that I've been on a recent visit to Canolfan Maidi, and obviously met them and talking to them, but it was in my Lord Lieutenant role, and it was very much, you know, in that capacity. So I just wanted to mention it, just so that you were aware.
That's
okay,
fine.
thanks.
There's no need to worry about an interest on that point of view.
Okay.
There's no issue whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Thomas.
So as Louise just pointed out, I am indeed named in item 9, and I believe there's an interest in item 12 as well, linking to my connection with Canolfan Maidi and possibly Adult Learning Wales. Sorry, I read it a few days ago.
Indeed. So Councillor Thomas will be declaring a prejudicial interest, Chair, for items 9 and 12, and so will be stepping out. My apologies, Councillor Carpenter, as well, because you are named in item 12 as seeking a dispensation in 1 or 2 areas. It would actually be a prejudicial interest for yourself as well. So when it comes to item 12, you just be asked to step out of the meeting at that point. And because it's the last item on the agenda, there'll be no need to rejoin then after that.
That's
so
fine,
when
Craig.
we do get
Thank
to that
you.
element, you just step out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Craig, and thank you, everybody. Right, we go on to agenda item 3, the forward work programme. I'm going to ask Craig to introduce this, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So what we'll be trying to do ultimately with the Standards Committee and all our other committees going forward is just to try and create a forward work programme, which basically sets out the type of matters we're going to be considering at each meeting over the course of the next civic year, in that sense. So Tammy is going to kindly share her screen for us just so I can bring up our forward work programme that we will be considering. And if I could just ask you to scroll down, Tammy. So slightly. Oops,
Sorry, Craig. Yes, just to confirm, you can all see my screen there.
We can see the teams back up. There we go, Tammy. That's perfect.
Yep.
So our first meeting obviously is the 19th of July 22. I won't worry about taking you through that meeting as we'll be working on that agenda today. So our next set of meetings, which will take place then going forward, you'll see some of the basic items that we're going to be talking about there. One, we'll be talking about the outcome of a recruitment exercise for standards committee members, our invites to group leaders, our general consideration of code of conduct complaints, gifts and hospitality, feedback of attendance at meetings, all relatively straightforward matters in that sense. So, and a lot of this will become clear as we're talking through today's paperwork and today's decisions we'll be asking members to endorse. But it's here ultimately for noting in the first instance. We update this on a regular basis and we can add additional items which in due course people would like to see. But ultimately it's just here for noting at this individual stage, Chair, but happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Does anybody have any questions for Craig?
I do. Will that be shared with members?
It will. You would have received a copy in your papers, but apologies, it was a miss from myself. So we'll be sending around a copy of it with from Tammy after this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, can't see any other hands up. If we're all happy with that, we can move on to agenda item 4, and that's the remit of the Standards Committee. And again, I'll ask Craig to present the report, please, Craig.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So the Standards Committee's terms and functions are set out for the majority in statute, and we have to implement them according to what the legislation requires of us. Our Neath Talbot County Borough Council contains a copy of the terms of reference, which are included now for members' information in paragraph 6 of this particular report, and sets out what your various matters ultimately are that you will be considering and what your remit will be during the course of this administration. It's again ultimately for noting, Chair, but happy to take any questions that members may have on it.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Craig on this? No, I can't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you, Craig. And we're content with that. So it's on to agenda item 5, code of conduct training to elected members following local government elections. And again, I'll ask Craig to speak to us on this, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So local government elections took place in May 2022, as members will be aware, and we received 19 new elected members ultimately to Neath Talbot Council. What we undertake during the period of May is quite a detailed member induction process, and the purpose of that is to try and highlight to our new and our returning members various different issues that ultimately they need to be aware of, what the remit and the role of the council is, and the various responsibilities of the different sections. So quite an in-depth induction programme which took place throughout May and still continues for now, because we're conscious we don't want to overburden members with new bits of information. So we structure it over the initial 3 months before as after they're elected, and we continue in sessions then into the autumn. One of the main priorities ultimately, though, from my perspective, and obviously in line with discussions that we've had previously in the Standards Committee, is the need for members to receive training on the code of conduct in particular, and to make sure that they are aware of the obligations that they're signing up to as members, because we're on their declaration of acceptance of office, which takes place within a few days of being elected, one of the first things they're actually asked to do is to sign a form to say that they will comply with the members' code of conduct. So there is a requirement ultimately to make sure that members are trained, they have an understanding of what that training ultimately would be. So the training is ultimately provided by myself as the council's monitoring officer, with the support of my deputy monitoring officer, Mr. Mike Shaw, and we undertook 4 sessions to date. So we did a session on the 26th of May at 10 AM, 2 PM and 4 PM. A further session on the 10th of June 2022. We will also be doing another mop-up session in about 2 weeks' time to make sure that if there are any members who ultimately missed it or anyone who would ultimately wish to sit through it again. The form of training that we adopt is pretty much a hybrid meeting session where we have members attending in person or attending virtually, and effectively I take them through the training slides which are included in your members' papers at Appendix 1. But in essence, it aims to cover some of the main themes and topics, one being ethical governance, effectively what it all means and what the basic principles are then for members to be aware of. Quite a detailed discussion on the code of conduct itself and issues of interests and predetermination, so members are aware what could they need to be aware of when it comes to considering reports before them and when engaging with members of the public and officers. We talked a lot about gifts and hospitality, and obviously the need to make sure that they're declaring anything that they may be receiving and not be accepting anything which may place them in any particular obligations. We spent a lot of time this sessions talking about the relationship between members and officers and what their respective roles would be to make sure that members are aware what the extent of their responsibilities are and what the responsibility of an officer would be, and how everyone has unique functions which come together to serve local government, but it's often never the twain should meet, and there should be a specific delineation of what those duties are. We also spoke a lot about social media and some of the do's and don'ts ultimately that need to be considered, and some of the pitfalls that members can often find themselves in as they promote community issues or various other matters on social media. So a couple of different matters which were sort of considered at that point, and it's actually now going to be followed up in some further training which I believe is taking place this week on social media and the various matters that need to be considered. And we also spoke about policing the code of conduct and how that works, and as you can imagine, for that we spoke quite significantly about the work of the Standards Committee and ultimately what they need to undertake and what their role would be in that process as well. So very well attended in that sense. We had 53 of the 60 members who have now confirmed that they have undertaken that training. Hopefully the remaining 7 will be attending now in a couple of weeks' time after the final mop-up session. But the good news is 100% of the 19 newly elected members have now attended this training and observed from there. What we also did, taking advantage of the hybrid way of delivering, is that the session has been recorded, and that will now be available for people to watch at their own leisure. If they ever feel that they need probably some help being sent to sleep, they can probably listen to me ream it on for the code of conduct for a good hour or so in that sense. But the good news is it's always going to be available. So if anyone ever needs a refresher or they just want to be able to consider some issues themselves, they haven't got to wait now for any specific training. They can just watch one of the recordings that we've provided. We also issued as well some guidance documents, which are some versions produced by the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, and some locally produced documents on interest, which I felt members would be beneficial to see. So overall, in a strong position now, we will continue to develop that training, but the 19 new members specifically have now had it, and we will be offering refresher sessions ultimately through the course now of the coming year and on a regular basis to make sure that members are constantly keeping themselves up to date with conduct requirements and any particularly new obligations that may be on them, Chair. So happy to answer any questions that members may have, Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig. Do you have any questions? Any members have any questions? I see, Louise, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions of Craig, please. First, an observation. Really good to see such a high number of members have taken part in the training, and particularly all of the newly elected members. So that's excellent. I know you've recorded them, but for those 7 members who haven't had training, are you going to insist that it's that they attend the training session rather than catching up? Because I think that's important to have that initial training. So that's one question. And the second question is, although it's not within your remit, Craig, to provide the training, I was just wondering, have members had their training for the planning committee? Because often that can lead to issues if people, if members are not quite clear on the protocols around planning. So those are the two questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. So in the first instance, I quite agree, great to see the new 100% crop of the new members have actually undertaken the training. With regards to those members who haven't received it yet, they are being specifically invited to attend the session, which is taking place now in 2 weeks' time. And I've also been liaising with their group leaders to make sure that they are doing what they can to encourage attendance as well. I've informed them if they're not attending, can they come back to me and confirm that they have watched the videos ultimately that I have provided online, so I can get some evidence that they have undertaken some of that training as well. So we are working on to try and address it with those particular 7, and we've been trying to provide some sessions which are maybe outside of standard working hours to make sure we can accommodate as many of the members as possible for those who maybe have work commitments and might not be able to attend during the day. So we're trying to find unique ways to make sure we're all being targeted. The bespoke committee training that's taken place has now happened. So members of the planning committee will have specific training undertaken by our development control team on the issues that ultimately they need to consider in respect of planning matters, because we don't allow members ultimately to participate in the actual planning committee work until they've had that training. Similarly then as well for things like our licensing and regulatory committees, that training has ultimately now taken place as well. Whilst we haven't had many meetings stood up for this element and they won't happen until September, we use this period to make sure that all the in-depth training has been undertaken so people can hit the ground running then as and when the committees are stood up and needing to take place.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Louise. Councillor Thomas has got a hand raised.
Thank you. It's mainly to come in on something that Louise mentioned. So I've thoroughly enjoyed the fact that we've had so much advanced training for everything since joining the county council. It's something that I struggled with at community council because there is, it's very much a case of you have to go and find documents and read them and learn for yourself. What I will say is there are a few conflicts in some of the induction training coming up. So I think I struggled to reach the Welsh language one. I did listen to the video on there, and but there is, I think it might be officer and member relations, the dedicated training on that I have a conflict with. So it would be nice if we could try and move the training so it's not conflicting with any committee commitments. So and I am a member of the planning committee as well. So I did attend that, and it does have some special rules that apply specifically. So I was pleased to do that. I'm that person. I like rules things. So I got on a lot of hefty rule committees.
Of course, thank you for that, Councillor Thomas. I will look into that then to check if we do have any conflicts in any way in that sense for it, because we tried to design it in such a way that there hasn't been, but we will certainly look into that to make sure there's nothing there that could prevent members from attending.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Right, I don't see any other hands raised. Does anybody else have any questions for Craig on this?
I see no more hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Okay, then, so I now refer members to the recommendations on page 16 of the report, and that recommendation says that members note the training provided to all 60 elected members of Neath Port Talbot Council and the take-up of training opportunities. Could I please ask for a proposer and a seconder for this recommendation? And if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in favour of the recommendations.
I propose,
Sorry.
Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you, and thank you, Tom. Okay, so
Just for clarity, Chair, I see Councillor Wayne Carpenter did have his hand up. It's down now. Just to check, nobody's raising their hand to disagree with this proposal.
No, just to agree, Tammy.
Okay, thank you. That's fab. Sorry, Chair. Please continue.
sorry, thank you very much, everybody, for that. And that can move us on to agenda item 6, which is the invitation to group leaders of Neath Port Talbot County Borough Council to attend Standards Committee. And again, it's a long pass out to Craig.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is something new for the Standards Committee, and it's something that I mentioned in previous committees that have taken place in previous months. The Local Government and Elections Wales Act changed some of the remit in respect of the Standards Committee, and ultimately what they did for that is place a specific obligation now on political group leaders to demonstrate that they are taking active steps to promote good quality standards and high standards of behaviour within the members of their political group. And what they've asked now as part of that new legislative requirement is that the Standards Committee monitor and observe whether the political group leaders are ultimately complying with that new duty that's been placed on them. There's been some consultation documents which have been prepared by Welsh Government, which have perhaps given an indication now as to how political group leaders may ultimately be sort of going to discharge some of their obligations on it. And if I can draw your attention to paragraph 4, for example, of the report, it gives some sort of examples basically as to how the members could ultimately sort of ensure that they are doing that. And it talks about demonstrating a personal commitment to developing and making sure the code is being applied, attending and encouraging members to undertake training, promoting civility and respect within group communications, trying to find ways to informally resolve matters without the need of having to go down the formal route of complaints via the Ombudsman. But perhaps the biggest one ultimately is promoting a culture within the group which supports high standards of conduct and integrity. As the leaders of the political group, they are the ones that members will look to, particularly newly elected members, to make sure the processes are being followed, and they have that perhaps that overarching responsibility to ensure that they are promoting that message as well. But one of those requirements then is for the Standards Committee obviously to work with group leaders to check in the first instance, are they complying with that duty? And perhaps the other element as well, what more can we be doing as a Standards Committee, as myself as monitoring officer, to make sure that we are supporting them in compliance with those duties? So one of the processes which we felt may help ultimately discharge that responsibility and to enable those discussions ultimately to take place was to invite political group leaders to attend a meeting of the Standards Committee on an annual basis, where we can have that general discussion with them to find out how they view matters, how they can work with the Standards Committee to try and take those matters forward. And hopefully, working positively and constructively together, it will have the benefit then of trying to improve the standards regime then with all members throughout the County Borough Council. So the guidance which Welsh Government has suggested is that there are numerous ways ultimately that this could be undertaken. It could be in the form of letters, monitoring reports, meetings, various different avenues. And I've perhaps felt that one of the best ways in which to try and take this forward is to have a discussion. It's to find out if there are issues, being able to speak to people, find out where those issues are, find out what we can do to assist, because correspondence will only take us so far, I find. But I think it's important that the group leaders perhaps have an awareness of the types of issues ultimately that we want to discuss, what those issues are. So what I've proposed at paragraph 15 of your report are a set of questions ultimately that we would issue to the group leaders in advance of the meeting, just to give them an overview of the questions specifically that we will be asking to them and to be the basis and the start of this conversation. They have a very generic set of questions based pretty much on what the legislation is saying and the guidance, and I've tried to cover off issues which perhaps I felt the Standards Committee themselves would wish to have some discussions on, and what could be the opening remit of the conversation, and we'll hopefully develop on then from there. But I'm happy to include any additional points that members may wish to see, or if we want to change anything in that sense. I'm conscious it's going to be your discussion there, and I'll just be helping to facilitate it and move it forward. So the report before you, Chair, is obviously just to explain this is the new rules that are being created on us. Specifically, I would be grateful for any comments that members would have on the set of questions ultimately that we issued. But with your approval then, Chair, and the approval of the committee, I'd look to extend the invite to the group leaders for the next set of meetings, and we can start the process of bringing them in and having this discussion with them. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig or any comments? Anybody got anything to say on what Craig has just told us? Yeah, Councillor Thomas.
So basically, I think it would be a really good idea for all of the groups. Certainly, I'm only really speaking from my group, but all of the groups to have a kind of sub code of conduct, like a minor code of conduct for themselves. So I know that our group has standing orders, but it would be really good if we could add to that a bit. And obviously we're still bound by the standard code of conduct, but maybe there could be some guidance offered on what sort of things that we might want to add and include on that, or perhaps training for the executives of those groups to do something like that.
I see what you mean. Absolutely, Councillor Thomas. Absolutely, we can see if we can word that to talk about how we can take the relationship ultimately that's within the political groups and your political group responsibilities and dovetail elements together in some way. So absolutely, I can include a question on that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Louise?
Thanks, Chair. Similar question really to what Sarah has just asked, because I was going to ask about, Craig, if you've given any training in inverted commas to the group leaders. Have you had them together, for example, to talk about this new duty, and how is it being received? So essentially, I guess, what training maybe have group leaders had, and perhaps do they need any? There's a similar question to Sarah, really. And the questions, I thought the questions are excellent, and I think they cover a lot of ground there. Just wondered, question B, I'd be a bit concerned if they said no, I don't think it's appropriate to have a code of conduct, and I just wonder, maybe just turning that question around a little bit to asking them, well, what's their view? How appropriate do they think the code of conduct is? And that might elicit, their views on, yes, it is appropriate, or yeah, it could cover more, or whatever. But sort of asking that an open question, because as if they said no, it's not appropriate, I think we'd all be worried, wouldn't we? So there was that one, and then the question H about views on the training. I certainly think that's a good one to get their views, because that's a way of getting feedback, and that would cover, I was thinking, and we could explore that with them, how effective they think the training is in raising standards, because it's all very well in having the training, which is absolutely great, and we absolutely need it, but it's what happens after that training within the group. So it's maybe asking them, well, how do you follow up on this training? Do you, within the group, maybe have a couple of sessions a year, or how do you review its effectiveness within your group? So they were just a couple of thoughts I had about the questions.
Of course, all sensible questions, Chair. I'm happy to include those, and I'll make those amendments to reflect them all on that point. So that's absolutely fine. Picking up the point about the group leaders training, as part of the induction programme, I did a specific session with all group leaders, highlighting to them what the new responsibility ultimately would be. And I ran through them the new guidance ultimately that's been created from the Welsh Government. A lot of the factors, for example, and how they would discharge that, going back to paragraph 4 of the report about the steps that need to be in place and what they should be considering. I explained I was not there to tell them how they ultimately should be running the group, but giving them the type of issues ultimately that they need to be there, and how they have that very active role now in making sure that they are promoting that culture. Little things I think I've seen some positive benefits for. Encouraging people to attend training has been very helpful. So when we've had the code of conduct training, I've been highlighting to the members who haven't been in attendance, and they've been working with me to trying to make sure and emphasize the importance of that training. And I've been trying to encourage them to think of it, this is a two-way relationship. They are not alone ultimately in dealing with these matters. I will be there ultimately to support them in discharging their duties. What I'm asking for in return is, when I am having the discussions ultimately with individual members, if there is a conduct related matter, they will work with me to make sure that they are promoting that message within the group, and making sure that they are working with that member as well, because I could probably only do so much as the monitoring officer. They need to have an equal responsibility from the political leadership as well, that these elements are coming in. So very receptive to the training, very engaged and happy with the new rules that are being put in place. I think what came to light is a lot of the political group leaders do this anyway. They regard that as being part of their role. What they're just seeing now is this being placed on a more formal footing. And obviously they now see the benefit of having the opportunity to have those discussions with the Standards Committee at the same time. Yeah,
that sounds very positive. Just a follow-up question is, it would be, I mean, I don't know how we would do this, so perhaps we need to give some thought to it. How we measure improvements from this new duty. So in a sense, we've got a baseline perhaps at the moment, but we do have, there's a really big turnover of members this year. So, when you think a third of the council are new members. And I think for us as standards, it would be helpful to know what impact this is having. And, you know, I don't know how we do that. Maybe a survey or whatever. It could be anecdotal. It could be a report from the leaders of the different groups themselves, reporting to the Standards Committee at the end of the year or something like that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But it's like, you know, anything that's new, perhaps we think, you know, later, well, I wonder how this, you know, what real impact has this had? So it would be good. And I think for the annual report as well, it would be helpful to be able to say how impactful it's been.
I absolutely agree, and I think it's certainly something we can look to develop in that sense as part of the annual report. What perhaps maybe the way in which we could approach this is we have the first meeting with all of the group leaders, and as we look into the year two and before we get into the second meeting with them, because they will be coming back to us on an annual basis, we look to see, well, what has been the learning, what has come out of that year one process, and how we can measure it and improve that element going forward. So yes, it's certainly something I think we can see as part of the long-term development, and to be able to benchmark what impact this new legislation is ultimately having on us, and are we seeing an improvement in the standards regime across the board?
Yeah, and I think it would also help with the Standards Committee thinking about the training that is provided. What more can we do as well? So in a sense, it's feedback for us as well, which will help us. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Louise, and thank you, Craig. Do I see anybody else's hand raised? No, I don't. Tammy, do you see anybody?
No, Chair, I don't see any more hands, no.
Well, does anybody else have any comments, any questions, any observations? No, okay. So I'm now going to refer the members to the recommendations on page 33 of the report, and that recommendation is that members extend an invite to group leaders of Neath, Talbot County Borough Council to attend a meeting of the Standards Committee to discuss code of conduct related matters to fulfil the legal obligations under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. So can I again ask for a proposer and a seconder, please? And if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in favour of the recommendation.
Sorry to jump in here, Chair. If I could just remind members what you've just said. If you raise your electronic hand, you are indicating to the contrary that you do not agree with this recommendation. So if you would like to verbally propose and second, as the Chair has suggested, that would be wonderful.
I'll
Thank
propose.
you, members.
Tammy?
I'll propose.
I second.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
okay.
Chair. That recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, Tammy. Right then, was agenda item 7 at South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee. And again, it's Craig. Would you help us, please?
Great, thank you very much, Chair. So members are to be aware that back in 2021, the legislation was introduced by the Welsh Government with regards to the creation of what we call corporate joint committees. And these are regional bodies which are effectively to be placed together with the aim of discharging certain functions. And we are in Neath Talbot and now part of a South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, which comprises representatives of Carmarthenshire Council, Swansea Council, Pembrokeshire Council, Brecon Beacons National Park and Pembrokeshire National Park Authority. And the purpose of this corporate joint committee is for us to work in collaboration with those other parties to effectively look at 3 substantive areas of work. The creation of a strategic planning direction, which is about looking at common themes in respect of planning matters between the region. Regional transport policies, which is again, as it says, looking at how we can work regionally to ensure our transport policies aligned and we are improving transport links ultimately within the community. And again, finally then, working regionally to ensure the economic well-being of the area is ultimately being considered and developed as we move forward. This is a new entity that's ultimately being created here. So whereas when we've done previous joint working, we do it by way of a working agreement and we find ways to document how we're going to be working together. The Corporate Joint Committee, though, is something slightly different in that it's its own entity. So it has the power to do things itself. It has the ability to appoint its own staff, to have its own members, to have various different aspects associated with it as well. So what the legislation requires us to do as part of this is ensure that there are responsibilities and functions in place to make sure that we are discharging obligations in respect of the usual matters such as scrutiny, governance and audit requirements, but obviously then quite importantly in respect of standards matters as well. So the Corporate Joint Committee needs to make sure that it is developing its own programme and ensuring that any members who are appointed have the appropriate controls in place. So, for example, they have a code of conduct to follow, they have rules and protocols in respects of gifts and hospitality. And similarly then as well, if there's any complaint about any of those members, that there is an avenue for those matters to be considered. So the manner in which we felt that it would be the best way to achieve this, rather than recruit a separate standards committee, which would have quite a limited function to oversee all of these different areas, would be to designate one of the authorities as the standards committee for the Corporate Joint Committee. And it was felt logically that the most appropriate standards committee would be the one where the monitoring officer operated from. And as you will have gathered, I am the monitoring officer for the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee. So accordingly, it was suggested that Neath Talbot Standards Committee effectively oversee this role. When it looks at what the actual work commitment is ultimately going to be, it's in fact no different ultimately to what we would be doing from the usual standards perspective. And all we will be focusing on are the potential members who are appointed to serve on the actual Corporate Joint Committee itself. But in that specific role only, because they will be the respective leaders of their own councils, they will have their own standards regime they need to follow and will be answerable to their own standards committee. So what we will be doing over the course of the year is just making sure that the Corporate Joint Committee has the appropriate processes, procedures ultimately in place, which for the most part are almost exactly the same as the ones which Neath Talbot Council's members will operate under. So I'll be bringing you the reports on an occasional basis just to make you aware of specific elements relating to the Corporate Joint Committee. But hopefully members will not need any sort of specific more information at this stage, but I'll be giving any training as and when it could be required. So definitely something new, Chair, for us to consider, and it will be a slight extension of the remit of the Standards Committee, but the overall work that we'll be doing will pretty much dovetail with what we do for Neath Talbot Council as well, Chair. So happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions, any observations, anything you'd like to say on that?
I
No.
see no hands, Chair.
No, neither do I, Tommy. So, right. So I'm now going to ask that the members, or refer the members to the recommendations on page 40 of the report. And that recommendation says that members note the delegation of the Standards Committee function of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee to Neath Talbot Council Standards Committee, and that reports will be brought on a future basis for members' consideration. Again, could I please ask for a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation, please?
I propose, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you both. Okay, are we moving on? Well, we're on to agenda item
Sorry,
8.
Chair. Sorry to interrupt there, Chair. Just to confirm that recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
I don't know how I'd live without you, Tommy. Anyway, I mean in a standards committee sense. So can we move on now then to agenda item 8, and that's Town and Community Council Code of Conduct Matters. And again, Craig.
Thank you very much, Chair.
You will have it for the time this is over.
So as members will be aware from the terms of reference that we spoke about at the beginning, one of the roles of the Standards Committee is to look at the conduct regime of our town and community councillors as well. And in the past, we've done various different avenues of trying to explore this. One thing I would like to do in the first instance, because as well as local government elections taking place, obviously within the County Borough Council in May, we would have had elections within town and community councils as well. So they will have had a rather increased turnout of members, and will potentially be arranging their own code of conduct training for those members, because they are under equal obligations to the same extent as county borough councils. So what I would like to do in the first instance is perhaps send out a questionnaire, Chair, to all town and community councils, just to get an idea in that sense. Have all their members now had training? Are there any particular issues ultimately that they need to be aware of, or we need to be aware of, that they would like to see from the Standards Committee? So in the first instance, a fact-finding exercise, so we can decide then the particular issues that we need to develop as time goes on. What I've also managed to arrange, Chair, with our town councils and community councils is that if members of the Standards Committee wish to attend a town and community council meeting to observe code of conduct, they are more than capable of doing so, and they are more than very much going to be welcomed at those meetings. So I'll have a list of dates in due course that I will circulate to all members, Chair, and they can highlight if there are any particularly they would wish to attend, or if whatever the case may be. One of the good news there is a lot of these meetings now take place virtually, so it hopefully means you can just drop in and observe from afar, almost, if you didn't actually want to attend the meeting in person. So I will circulate those dates in due course. But the fundamental issue within this report, Chair, is to just highlight to members obviously what their role will be, and to ask for approval to issue the questionnaire ultimately to our clerk colleagues, and I'll bring these results back then to a future meeting.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Again, are there any questions, any observations, anything anybody'd like to say on what Craig has just told us? Yeah,
Louise, Chair.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, please, Chair. In paragraph 4, Craig, you mentioned that about being invited to attend town community council meetings. You just mentioned the clerk of Neath Town Council. So, but presumably, as you said, you'd be sending a list of other meetings. It won't just be Neath Town Council. It
will indeed. I've specifically spoken to the clerk of Neath Town Council, who was more than happy to facilitate some in the shorter term. I have a general request out to all our clerk colleagues at the moment. I'm just waiting for some of them to come back to me. Right. But in the interim, Neath Town Council have confirmed they're more than happy to receive any invites.
Okay, thank you. And then on the questionnaire, it's good to get the facts in. I just wondered, or if I may make a couple of suggestions with regards to the questionnaire. I thought question 2 could be split. So first of all, dealing with the numbers of members who have received training. So question 2, asking have all members received the training? It's either yes or no, and if no, how many members have not had the training? So you know how many haven't had the training, and perhaps a third question there, when are they going to be trained, or when will they receive the training? So deal with that. And then question 3, perhaps a standalone question, what format did the training take? So it just separates it, if that's okay. Question 5, as it stands, have members been made aware that they are able to apply for dispensation to speak upon matters on which they have a prejudicial interest rather than information? Yeah. And the question 6, do you have a local resolution process in place? That's the first question. And then if not, has your town council considered putting one in place? So, and if so, when? Again, asking them, you know, they might have one in ready to implement, but we need to know, don't we, when they're going to do that? So that might focus their mind if they haven't got one. And the next question, question 6. Role as clerk rather than group leader.
Group leader, yes. Sorry, yes. I will correct that then in that sense, Polly. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That was my suggestion.
I will make all of those changes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again, Louise. Thank you, Craig. Councillor Thomas.
Hi. Yes. So Craig obviously is aware of me prejudice, and it's because of my role on community council, and I do feel like there really I realise the law has changed and it's saying that we have to have this training, which is excellent, but I do feel there is a lack of understanding of the code of conduct and other things at community councils. And I'm very conscious that the Welsh Government are keen to expand the remit of community councils. And while we, community councils do have budgets and they have been encouraged, like I know when we did our proposed budget last year, we increased the training budget to make sure that every councillor could attend at least 3 courses through One Voice Wales each, plus our clerks training. But they do have somewhat limited resources. And I do feel that there does need to be a bit of support offered to community councils if they're going to be increasing their roles and responsibilities, and code of conduct is so important. And I've had so many conversations with town and community councillors where they don't even know what the code of conduct is, and I realise that they've signed their declarations and they've been given copies, but I mean it's not unusual for people to not read big hefty documents and stuff. So I do feel that it's really important that we don't just ask the question, but also sort of point out the fact that this is a legal requirement now, that they do have to sort of, attend training, and code of conduct really should be top of the list.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Craig?
Absolutely, and what I've been trying to do, for example, on code of conduct side, is offering my services to some clerks as well, that if they feel they want me to pitch up and undertake some training sessions for them, recognizing the importance from my own perspective, a little bit of pre-work in that sense could prevent issues further on down the line from happening. So the more support we can provide on conduct related matters, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So it's one of the discussions I have with my clerk colleagues in the other authorities and the local councils about, well, how can I help out to do some training? And I've done recordings, I can do hour sessions with them in that sense as members. There are various different processes, so we're always open to having that dialogue to see how we can roll out that training package a little bit more.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. Am I allowed to, I know I'm an observer today, but am I allowed to say something?
Yes, I think that's fine, Councillor Edwards, yes.
Thank you. I'd just like to support what Councillor Thomas has said, because at community council level, we've been thrust upon with more and more legislation from Welsh Government. It's extremely difficult because no money ever follows it. I'll give an instance now with the hybrid meetings. They put this legislation in place that we have to make available digital as well as face-to-face meetings and so on. No money until quite recently to follow that up, whereas community councils and town council will have set their precept back in the November. If anything comes into place after that, we haven't budgeted for it. Because we have precepts, we try to keep those precepts as low as possible, to save putting the council tax up higher. And so it's quite difficult for us. I work quite closely with One Voice Wales, and they're very helpful. They've been working on what they call a toolkit, and that'll be coming out now after the election. And there's a lot of legislation in there. But I do think, if you've got a part-time clerk, as we have, 12 hours a week, all of this extra workload, it means that you've either got to increase the hours for your clerk, which costs more to the council, or maybe you don't comply. But I think we all, my councillors anyway, know about the importance of the code of conduct. So, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Councillor Edwards for your contribution. I'm not only the chairman of Neath Talbot Council and a standards committee, sorry, I'm the chairman of a standards committee in Bridgend, and I've got strong feelings about town and community councils that we ought to give greater input as a standards committee for Neath Talbot and visit as often as we can, fit it in, our town councils and community councils, just to show presence and show support and make town and community councils aware of their obligations to a standards committee. I say this without any evidence, but I seem in my mind to think that the problems that standards committee have had to deal with, both in Neath Talbot and in Bridgend, most of them have been to do with town and community councils. And that's not to be derogatory about town or community councils. It might be that they are not as aware of their obligations to a code of conduct as they might be, and I think we can do a lot to help that. Right, I've got that off my chest. I'm feeling better now. Louise, you have something to say?
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to what Carolyn and Sarah said, and coming back to the questionnaire, Craig, just wonder if that question 7 could maybe be changed to ask something more specifically about, so for example, what support or what further support could the Standards Committee give you to help you in your role or something, rather than saying what work could the Standards Committee do. I think that might be a bit difficult for community councils to articulate, whereas if you ask them specifically what support they might need, perhaps that might be more clearer to them. Perhaps Carolyn and Sarah, you'd have a view on that, but I'm just thinking there needs to be a question there, doesn't it, based on what you've said, that actually we need to tease that out as to how the Standards Committee, how we can either be proactive or whatever in actually knowing. I thought that question was maybe a bit nebulous in terms of in the context of what you said.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Councillor Thomas.
So coming back in on what Louise said, I think as well, maybe just contacting the clerks. I'm not saying that all of the questions are appropriate for councillors, but it might be useful to also do a general survey of the councillors, because clerks might not have a full understanding of every councillor's in-depth understanding of the code of conduct. They might assume that people have read the documents they were given and correctly signed things and so on. People should do that, but I mean, maybe having a little bit of a survey for all the town and community councillors and some trick questions that might trip them up, you know, so that we get a better understanding of just how well people do know this stuff. So just, I don't want to throw my community council under the bus, just to be super clear. They do have a code of conduct and a local resolution policy. They do definitely know about it now. It's just we had some glitches and that's what led to the situation. And I don't think, you know, I don't know, but I don't think we're really an outlier. I think there needs to be a lot more support for our town and community councillors.
Certainly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Louise, you still had your hand raised.
I did, yeah, yes, and it was actually, as Sarah was saying that, I think that sounds a really good thing to do. Just wondering about the practicalities of it, because Craig, that might be. I was just wondering, could that be something, perhaps you could draft a questionnaire and ask the clerks to send out, so that they got the information first, and then they could then come to you with that information. Because if you had replies from all councillors, community councillors, that might be a bit difficult to manage. Whereas if the individual community clerks got that information in the first case, that would maybe help to you know, formulate some idea of what we could provide.
I'll work on some options and potentially I could bring a future report back then to the committee ultimately for consideration. I'm just thinking whether there are tools out there as well where we could do an online survey, which obviously we could get the results being fed back in then without and clerks could forward it on for us on our behalf. So there could be different avenues we can consider on this. So with the consent chair, what I will do is if members are happy for me to issue this initial survey initially, it's something we can build in when we get some results back and I report that at the next committee. We can work out some next steps and how we task that forward with the remaining town and community councillors themselves, and we develop that programme of work then from there. So with the consent chair, that's the approach I think we could probably adopt.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I don't see any other hands raised. Tammy, do you see anybody?
Councillor Sarah Thomas has her hand raised again. Chair, I'm not sure if it's a legacy hand.
It's not. So it was just to come back. The reason I was thinking of it was we do the councillor survey. So if you stand for local government or community council, you always get a councillor's survey. I realise that's gone now, but I mean, an online survey would be ideal, as long as we've got some way of knowing that people have done it, sort of thing.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
No more hands raised, Chair.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. Again, I will say, I think it's pretty important that we do as much as we can do to help town and community councillors to, with code of conduct matters. It is important. It's something I feel strongly about. Okay, I'm going to ask now, I'm going to, refer the members to the recommendations on page 43 of the report. The recommendation says that members approve the issue of the Code of Conduct questionnaire annexed at Appendix 1 of this report for issue to town and community clerks, and the report to be brought back to members at the next Standards Committee. Could I have a proposer and a seconder for this, please?
I'll propose.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Tammy, you noted that?
Yes, Chair, that recommendation has been approved. Thank you.
There we are then. So now then, perhaps the longest item is, it's item 9, and that's the grant of dispensation under section 81, paragraph 4 of the Local Government Act 2000 Community Council on pages 47 to 50. And again, Craig, you can have to speak to us on this.
Do I need to leave now?
Yes, Councillor
Okay.
Thomas, if you could step up
Thank-
now, that would be great.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
So thank you very much, Chair. So this is an application that the Standards Committee has received from Town and Community Councillors, Councillor Sonia Reynolds and Councillor Sarah Thomas in respect of Canolfan Mardy. They regularly have matters appearing before the Gwauncaegurwen Community Council in respect of Canolfan Mardy, and they both serve at the moment as trustees of that charity in non-remunerated positions. As a result of that, they are asking for a dispensation to be able to speak and vote on matters, provided they don't relate to anything that would give financial benefit ultimately to themselves. It doesn't relate to a grant application or consideration of a contract between Canolfan Mardy and the Community Council. And if, for example, there was ever circumstances where a member of the public would feel it may not be appropriate for them to take part in that various matter. Standards Committee are entitled to grant a dispensation in that regard. So the report before you today is recommending that you can grant a dispensation in these circumstances, provided it adopts those caveats which I mentioned in paragraph 9 of the report. But happy to answer any questions, Chair, the members may have.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Craig?
I see no hands, Chair.
All right then, so I'm going to again refer members to the recommendation as Craig has mentioned on page 50 of the report. So could I please have again a proposer and a seconder for this recommendation, please? The recommendation being...
Yes, propose.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Tammy, noted?
Yes, Chair, that's been approved. Thank you.
Right. So we're now on to agenda item 11, and is this at this point, Craig, that we are going to ask to exclude members of the public? If anyone will.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just take you back an item. There's urgent items, but you have none, Chair.
Oh yeah, I did skip. Sorry, Tammy.
It's okay, Chair.
Just testing to make sure we're anyway. Agenda item 11, urgent items. I have received no urgent items. So agenda item 11, access to meetings. To resolve to exclude the public from the following items pursuant to section 100A, paragraph 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and exempt paragraphs 12 and 13 of part 4 of the Schedule 12A to the above Act. Again, I need a proposal and a seconder for this.
Proposed, Chair.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.